record. Boom. Where did I go? For here. Here we go. There we go.
There we go. So, all right, guys. Thanks for being patient. Welcome. My name is Phillip Werlau. This is Crypto Investigations. I'm going to be combining some other presentations I've given to give you kind of an overview of the Web3 landscape, threat landscape, and then dive into like a real investigation. The public attack that came out in last November, and I'll be diving into some of the tools I use and how I go about kind of investigating these types of things. So a little background on me. I've been a part of Hack Miami for, 10 years now at this point. I worked as a SOC manager for 5 years. In the last 2, I've worked for a company called Chain AI as an engineering manager and head of threat research. I do a lot of work, investigative work with specifically IRS criminal investigations, but other, government agencies, the SEC, U.S. Secret Service, and others. And I was also the lead, I led the development of a product called Web3 SOC, which was a finalist for the RSA Innovation Sandbox, doing monitoring, alerting in Web3. So let's jump into it. I think the biggest thing that I want to get across about Web3 applications, and does anyone here not know what Web3 is? Have you all heard about Web3? Perfect, okay. So Web3 is basically just technologies that include blockchain, or leveraging blockchain, right? So how Web 2 was websites and apps that use like multimedia, like YouTube, like Facebook, more advanced apps. These are ones that include blockchain applications. So that's things like the metaverse, GameFi, blockchain gaming, things like DeFi, decentralized finance, and stuff like that. So if you have something that touches the blockchain, it's basically Web3. But the thing I want to bring up is that Web3 is just an extension of Web 2. So while you do have all of this blockchain and this part of the application that's specific to the blockchain, smart contracts, the blockchain itself, you also have traditional security concerns with, you have web servers, you have databases, you have API connections. On the front end, you have keys that you use to sign transactions, and all of these are vulnerable to types of attacks that are not new, that we've been seeing. And so I'll dive into those a little bit. So let's start out with kind of the client side of this picture. I'm pretty sure some of you guys probably know what a private key is, but private keys are part of public private key cryptography, the type of cryptography where one key locks it, another key unlocks it. And every cryptocurrency is basically based on this idea, where the public key is what you give out that is used to generate your wallet address. So when you give your wallet address, that's equivalent to your public key. Your private key is what needs to be kept private and is what you use to sign transactions to prove ownership. Excellent. Perfect. That's fine. Just yeah. That's represented usually as like 64 hexadecimal characters, but to make it a little bit more usable in crypto, they usually what's called BIP39. It's a protocol that allows you to represent this private key as a set of 12 mnemonic phrases. So this is really important because this is basically what controls your wallet. When you have things like hardware wallets or software wallets, when you transfer between them, this is what you're using, and these words are the key to the castle. So people can get tricked into divulging them and losing their funds. But importantly, private keys are just a number. You actually need a wallet to use that private key to actually sign transactions, right? This is the software that's going to use your private key to create a transaction that you'll then send to the blockchain. This comes in a bunch of different forms. It's software, but you have browser extensions, you have mobile apps, you have web-based wallets. You also have hardware wallets, where it's a dedicated piece of hardware where the keys never leave the piece. You can't even access the keys if you wanted to. Message gets sent in, it signs it and sends it out. And really good for security in Web3. So let's go into some of the kind of vulnerabilities and exploits that we see. The biggest one is a leak or a compromise of the private keys. A surprising number of attacks happen this way. The actual underlying smart contract and the software can be secure, but if someone steals the keys to the castle,
Let's go to your Discord.
Okay.
And unmute yours.
Unmute music or unmute mic?
Unmute your mic.
All right, there we go. One second. Deafen yourself.
So you guys mind making this side a little bit brighter too?
Sorry.
No,
these
there's no brightness.
These are like 20-year-old monitors, sorry.
Do you want to switch seats while they're doing that? To the bright side? Come over to the bright side.
The screen is pretty clear to me.
Yeah.
Close to.
All right, now unmute, and we should be good to go. Can everyone hear me?
Pressure for one.
Everything good on that side? You see me talking? Good, good,
Just to
good?
be clear, you guys can hear us talking now on Discord?
Yeah, looks like I got it.
All right.
Got a thumbs up there. All right, so back into it here. Yeah, perfect. So, private key leaks. This is something that we've seen, unfortunately, quite a number of times. A good example is in November of 22, I investigated a hack of a token called P-Gala. Now, to give you some background, this is what's called a bridge token. So, Gala is a company that does Web3 gaming. They do games, and they have a token that you use as kind of rewards. It's how they incentivize and monetize the whole process. That is done on a blockchain called Ethereum. Great, it's on the blockchain, but the token has value, and there's a lot of training that goes on in other chains, in this case, Binance Smart Chain. Another blockchain, it's very much like Ethereum, it uses the same technology, but it's just a different ecosystem. People want to trade on there, but it's only available on Ethereum. So a company called P Network creates what are called bridged assets, right? They create a smart contract where you bring in the tokens, they lock them up, and then they issue you a token on another blockchain that represents those locked up tokens. So it's a way of basically representing an asset from one chain on another chain. Usually, they're just as good as the original token, right? You can trade them, whatever, but since we've added this extra layer on top of it, there's this kind of extra threat attack surface here. The attack surface is who's minting those coins, right? A bridge usually has some type of central server that's kind of issuing tokens. Every time a smart contract you deposit here, it sees that and issues you a single number of tokens. But those keys are sitting in a database somewhere. And in this case, they were extra sloppy with it. These keys were just kind of used by the developer. And the developer at one point created a testing suite for their software and uploaded it to a public GitHub repository. And line right here, private key, just put it in plain text in a testing suite. And an attacker found this, and these were the keys that were used to control the smart contract. So they could mint an unlimited number of tokens and basically devalue, kind of sweep the market. So luckily in this case, interesting, they were compromised for a while. The attacker never actually attacked them. They found out about it before it happened, and they were able to do a white hat attack on themselves. This is an interesting thing about crypto and smart contracts. They're immutable in a lot of cases. So if you find a vulnerability, there's nothing you can patch. In a lot of cases, your best effort or your best bet is to do a white hat attack on yourself, which is what they did here. They minted a bunch of uncollateralized tokens, went to the market and drained it, and then basically promised everyone, hey, we'll pay out what we stole. We did this so the attacker doesn't steal it. So, interesting case. On the flip side of that, instead of leaking it, you can unintentionally leak it, which is to say you get phished. This is pretty common, especially for low technical users. I said before, those 12 words represent your private keys. And a lot of work goes into, like MetaMask, in telling people, don't give these words out, these are your keys. But still, people fall for things like this. This is a real email that went out purporting to be from MetaMask support saying, hey, we just need to verify your wallet. Go ahead, go to the site and put in those 12 words and we'll verify you're all good to go. And a lot of people fall for this, and once they have your keys, they can access your funds from anywhere and just transfer any funds that you have out to your wallet. So we see these types of attacks fairly often. Compromise of private keys, while low technical, they are fairly effective and fairly common. So moving on, this is still on the client side, but we're no longer looking at compromising the keys. We're looking at trying to get things in transit. So they still retain their keys, but we're trying to fool them into signing a transaction that, unwittingly, right? So these have been around for a very long time. Probably one of the first attacks we saw in the Web3 space in early Bitcoin attacks, which is clipboard hijackers. They basically, it's a virus that gets installed on your machine. It monitors the clipboard, the copy and pasting that you're doing. Bitcoin addresses, cryptocurrency addresses are really long. No one is going to type them in by hand, especially because you're gonna, likely
It's so awfully tedious.
Yeah.
I feel so violated right now. 'Cause
Absolutely.
It's definitely something that I do.
So you copy and paste them.
Everybody
Everyone does. And what this does is it monitors for things that take the form of a crypto address. They're a certain key length, they have a certain format, and when it finds them, it just swaps it for its own address. What they're assuming you're doing is you're transferring funds. Hey, I'm going to send some to Respeto, give me your address, I copy and paste it, and I don't notice that when the address I pasted.
So it's a man-in-the-middle attack.
It's a man-in-the-middle attack, exactly. Fairly low technical, but it's pretty effective because people don't check their keys. Now in this case, you can see the last couple of digits, the first couple of digits do seem common, and there are certain kind of targeted attacks where they will target the person and try and get the first and last couple of keys to match. I've been seeing a lot more of this. A lot of websites, they'll show you in a little bit. Trunking, they show you the first four, ... and the last four, right? But entropy involved in it, it's not that hard to generate an address that matches the first and last, but everything in the middle is different. And we've seen cases where people fall victim for that because, I figure first and last, what's the chances that it's the same? Well, if you're targeted, it can be pretty high. So, yeah, this is something we saw. There's a couple of them that you can buy them online, Darknet. They're the Lapis Clipper, Ruby Clipper. These are open, these are sold on the dark web. And the mitigation here is manually confirming your address. First and last is a good one, but we're even seeing that getting compromised. When you use things like hardware wallets, one of the really important features on there is that any transaction you sign, it will display on your screen. So you can't get man in the middle. In the sense of, even if your computer gets in the display and it's all showing off, the address that shows up on your hardware wallet is the address you're signing. So that's one of the things. Always be careful with these things. And the more money you're transferring, the more careful you should be. All right. So moving on, these are a bit more technical, a little bit more complex. These are stealers. These are not specific just to cryptocurrencies, but they're definitely targeting cryptocurrencies. These are malware that's designed to exfiltrate sensitive data, and it looks for everything on your computer. So it will compromise, your password manager, your two-factor authentication. It will do in-memory extraction. It will look for keys in active memory and extract them. And so we're looking for all types of passwords, whatever, but one of the things that they mainly go after is crypto addresses. This is less of a problem. This is more of a problem for like Bitcoin wallets and stuff. Again, hardware wallets would keep you safe because they can't even grab the keys out because it's not on the device they infected. But we see them, Agrit Stealer, Mars Stealer, they're all over the dark web. You can buy them for fairly cheap, $100, $250. And yeah. And the mitigation here is the same mitigation you would have for any malware on your computer. Yeah, go ahead.
How do you match a private key to a public key? So if I had a USB stick, I had my private key on there, just say lousy encryption, password. Someone found it. What would they do with it? How could they?
I'll give you, actually, this happened to me when I went to this attack. The way I confirmed this attack is I found this GitHub repository. I took this private key and I just imported it into a wallet. Boom, popped up. So there is a process, there's a cryptographic process that relates the two keys. The wallets will do that work for you. I don't know if there are probably libraries out there that you can plug it in and it'll give you the generated private key. I don't know that it's super straightforward. There is some cryptographic process there. But in this case, I literally took this private key, dumped into MetaMask because they have a way of importing a wallet by private key, and it will do the work in the background and showed me the public key there. And that's how I could confirm that this attack.
Oh, you generate your public key from your private key.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about crypto. You don't have to get anyone to generate your wallet for most of these. In some, actually, I think XRP or XRP is different. But in a lot of these, you don't have to tell anyone you generate an address. Once you generate it on your own, it's there. Even though there's no activity on the blockchain, you can now sign addresses and sign transactions with it.
Okay, now backing up to the bridge, isn't that very similar to currency exchange?
Bridges are very interesting. Bridges are a whole umbrella term. Bridges is basically just a way of saying I took an asset from one place and took it to another, from one chain to another. How you do that, there's a million different ways to skin that cat. Some of them are, like you say, it's just kind of a off-chain custodial book that's keeping track of both. Some of them are a lot more complicated, using decentralized networks and validators and stuff, and there's no single custodian and stuff like this. So that's a whole field I could get into, is the different approaches to bridging assets. And they run the gamut on how secure they are. Some of them, like what I just showed, are the most insecure. There's a single key that can get compromised and the entire thing gets blown up. Some of these are much more complicated and secure. All right, so moving on from the client end, this is the dApp front end. So this is, we're not on the blockchain yet, but this is the, web servers, databases, all in the traditional type of web applications that is helping mediate this transaction, right? So they provide a usable user interface to a smart contract. You can go directly to a smart contract and interface with it. It's not very user-friendly. You gotta know what the values mean, you gotta know the parameters mean. So this will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you of making it usable. But it's not necessary. Again, something important when developing dApps is to know, never put restrictions in your dApp. Never rely on it as kind of a security, because anyone can always just go around and go directly to the blockchain. So your security should be built into the blockchain smart contracts, and this should just be looked at as a user-friendly way of accessing it. But since it's that way, it does form an attack surface, because if you can manipulate the dApp front end, you can manipulate what people think they're doing, right? And we've seen this a couple of times. So what's it do? It provides a usable interface. It interfaces with node providers to read data from the blockchain. So you can either host your own node or use a service like QuickNode or Alchemy or one of these that provides you an API and allows you to interact with the blockchain. Get information, send information, but that forms another attack surface that can be compromised. And the interesting thing is it generates a transaction just for the wallet to approve. A really interesting thing about how dApps work is communication with the dApp front end is not bidirectional. So when you want to make a transaction, you don't send it to the dApp front end, it goes directly to the blockchain. So you've got here, let's go back up. You've got a node provider, and you can see here, the communication from the browser and the wallet does not go back to the dApp front end to go to the node provider. The wallet has its own node provider. It doesn't need to be the same one that the dApp front end is working, so it's kind of circular. So any transactions you're making here, you can't actually validate them a lot of the time on the back end. So this prevents certain security. I can't say, hey, I told you to sign this transaction. If it gets man in the middle, I as the dApp front end can't check that. So I hand off information to the wallet signs it, and it itself goes to a node provider to get to the blockchain. It's an important thing to understand on that. So let's talk about a couple of attacks that we've seen here. This is by far the most prevalent attack that I've investigated, airdrop phishing. So to give you some background on what an airdrop is, a lot of tokens, a lot of these projects, the way that they bootstrap themselves, they get a token out there. Back in 2017, there were things called ICOs, initial coin offerings. There are regulatory issues with that. A lot of those are securities. People have kind of gone away from that model. In the 2021 bull cycle we saw a lot of airdrops. They're still around. People are kind of pulling back, but you reward people who have used your platform. So you create a platform, people use it, sometime in the roadmap there's a token launch, and they look at who's used their platform, and they go, those are the people we're going to give tokens to. Because they're the most likely to actually want to use their platform, they're the most likely to not just turn around and sell these, they actually want to engage in our platform. So they're pretty common. It's a good way to make money. You're active in Web3, you can get rewarded for it. On the flip side of this, people take advantage of it. People are always looking for ways of making money in airdrops, so people create scam tokens. And they masquerade as legitimate sites. We see this. Bored Ape Yacht Club is a really common NFT project, really popular. At some point, they released a token to go along with it called ApeCoin. It was a real thing. There was a real airdrop, but around the same time, people created fake airdrops to bring people in. And what was so insidious about this is usually the best way to avoid these fake airdrops is look at legitimate communication channels. Look at their Twitter, look at the founder, look at their website. Have they announced this before and have you gone there? A lot of the times there'll be scam airdrops for an airdrop that hasn't occurred yet. So look at legitimate channels. What's insidious about this attack was they actually hacked the Twitter accounts of some of the legitimate channels and started putting out this fake airdrop stuff. So they brought in a lot of people. So what is the actual attack here? Well, instead of giving people free coins, the smart contract that they're accessing is actually doing what's called an allowance scam. It's looking at all the different tokens you have in your wallet and says, sign me off as someone who's allowed to access those tokens. That functionality is really important for DeFi and decentralized exchanges to be able to verify, hey, this person's allowed to use X amount of tokens. But what it does is they basically steal all your tokens. They drain your wallet. They just take everything that's in there. You think you're getting money, but really you're getting robbed. Really, really, really common. We see it a lot. The mitigation here, verify what you're signing. A lot of the times your wallet will tell you, I mean, it might be a little technical, but it'll show a function name or some information. You can even run it through what are called simulators. They'll show you, hey, if you were to sign off on this transaction, this is what the outcome would be. You wouldn't be getting free tokens, you'd be getting drained of your tokens. A couple of mitigations, but honestly, if I have to say, this is one of the biggest places that Web3 needs to get better about security. It's clarifying to users what they're signing off on. Sticking to the front end place, this is one of the worst attacks I've seen. Luckily, the size wasn't too bad, but there's very little mitigation to this. So instead of a fake phishing site, where the site's fake, hosted by a fake person, the front end itself can get compromised. And this happened in 2021 for a company called BadgerDAO. Now, they provided a swapping platform where you could do decentralized finance, swap tokens for other tokens. They got hacked through their Cloudflare API keys. One of the developers was careless, Cloudflare API keys got leaked. The attacker used those API keys to inject a malicious script. This was basically a man in the middle. So the site in the background worked fine, but when it went to generate a transaction, the script would catch it and go, no, not that, and generate its own transaction. So the site seemed to work fine. All the other indicators that you would usually get, like MetaMask tells you, confirms the domain, it tells you the stuff that you're dealing with, right? Everything else looked good. But again, what they were doing is doing malicious approvals. This is the approval allowance scam that I was talking about. People got their wallet drained. It's a very difficult one. You could do probably a transaction simulation, but a lot of the typical things that you would do to avoid this attack fail if the actual front end gets compromised. So just shows you the risks that happen when you have this kind of middle layer of adapt front end to the smart contracts. So moving forward, I'm going to go through this a little bit fast, but this is a really interesting thing about blockchains. There's something called a mempool. When you sign a transaction, it doesn't immediately get executed. It actually goes into a memory pool. And there's this whole system of in mining and staking where the people who are generating the blockchain select transactions out of the pool. It's usually fee-based, so you have to have a transaction fee on there, and it's kind of an auction. So if there's a lot in the mempool, you kind of have to bid above to get more likely to get selected by a miner or a validator. But this opens up a vulnerability in the sense of what's called front running. So front running happens in traditional markets, but front running here is I see, for example, someone wants to execute a trade, a swap for two assets. That comes into the mempool. It's public. It's viewable. There are people who make money on front running that transaction, seeing, hey, if I were to make a trade before this guy, I could make some money. I could arbitrage this trade. It's gotten so bad. This is called what's called minor extractable value or maximal extractable value, that there are entire industries around it, to the point where a company called Flashbots has basically just turned it into a public good. They said, if this is going to become a race to the bottom, we're just going to open source it, and now it's just kind of part of the ecosystem. Very fascinating, but it does open up some really interesting attacks that unfortunately I'm not going to go into here today, but very fascinating. Yes?
Can you explain the previous pictures? just come on.
These slides were created by one of my coworkers who spoke on this. This is purgatory. So it's like memory purgatory.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
That's what that was supposed
Just
to be.
confirming that.
Yes.
I was like, wait, I don't really go to church often.
Yeah, it's like transaction purgatory.
Purgatory.
Yeah. And it's true because, for example, when the network's really congested and fees are getting outbid and fees are going up, you can get in a situation where your transaction just doesn't get processed.
And it just sits there.
It just sits there because you're bidding too low and people on the fees are going up. And I've had times where you have to invalidate your transaction. You know it's not going to get executed. Mm-hmm. You actually resubmit it with a higher fee just to get it through. This gets really interesting for things like NFT mintings and stuff, where it's a moment in time, where it's a race, and the fees will spike as everyone's trying to get ahead of each other to do something. So interesting stuff. And then this is the part that's actually my expertise, and the part that's particular to blockchains, smart contracts. So a smart contract is basically just a program that is stored on the blockchain. Consists of code, which are the functions, and data represented as states, and they reside at an address. So just as a wallet has an address, a smart contract also has an address. Difference is they're not controllable. I mean, they can be if you make them, but by default, the only thing that controls a smart contract is the code in there. So if I am the deployer of a smart contract, unless I wrote code that allows me special privileges, I have no privileges. And this can get you some sticky situations where, for example, if you didn't put in code to handle tokens or NFTs and people send it to the smart contract, they're gone. They're inaccessible. Completely inaccessible, can never be done. And there's parts of smart contracts that are meant to kind of prevent sending tokens or assets to a smart contract that has no way of dealing with them because they're stuck there. So interesting stuff. Think about smart contracts. Basically anything you've ever heard of in a blockchain other than the native asset is a smart contract. So that's tokens. In the Ethereum network, the only thing that's native is Ether. Every other token you've ever heard of is a smart contract and is controlled by a smart contract. NFTs, smart contracts. Decentralized finance and all of those things are all smart contracts. So basically everything is a smart contract. Now I'm going to get into a more intense case, but the issues here is that the vulnerabilities and the issues with smart contracts are not consistent. They tend to be at the application layer, they're particular to the program. There are a couple of ones that are kind of broad-based. Overflows used to be an issue. This is now kind of a solved issue. It's solidity greater than 0.8. It's kind of built in. But overflows used to happen. And there were a couple. There's a coin called Beauty Ecosystem Coin that fell apart because an attacker used an overflow bug in one of their transfers to mint unlimited number of tokens, and it just crashed the token. So that's one. The one that we really look at and is particular to smart contracts is reentrancy. Smart contracts can call other smart contracts, right? And when this happens, they give up program flow. So they execute another smart contract and they lose control of what's going on. And this can be taken advantage of by re-entering the contract that called you. So let's give a situation where there is a transfer. First part of the transfer is check your balance. You want to send 20 coins? Do you have 20 coins to send? If you don't, then forget it. We're going off. Second one is send the funds. I send the funds, and a lot of the time for certain assets, you actually have to give up control flow to do that. This happens, as I said, to prevent assets from getting locked. They usually execute a function and go, hey, do you support the token I'm about to send you? And by doing that, they give up flow. The problem is when this contract, instead of responding how the original one expected, like, yes, I do support this token, go ahead and send them to me, it executes another transfer. And again, we sent the funds, but we didn't update the balance. So if I was sending 20 tokens here, I sent the tokens, I checked the balance, well, I haven't updated the balance yet. I haven't gotten to that code yet. So my balance is still 20, so I send another 20. I re-enter again. My balance is still 20, I send another 20. And I can, from 20 tokens in my balance, I can drain the entire contract by just calling it over and over and over again. And then when I decide it's over, we update the balance, minus 20. It was only once. So at this point, I have the tokens, and the balance is all off. I've drained the pool, and I've gone away. This has happened. This was actually one of the biggest hacks that happened. The DAO hack in 2016 fell apart because someone used a function that was basically giving me the ability to drain the entire smart contract. So something we definitely look out for. There are ways to prevent it. The big one is update your balances before you give up control flow. So don't do this thing where you're giving up control flow and then have to update a state. Update all of your states before you send funds. This is even more important in smart contracts because if the entire thing can't execute properly, the entire transaction gets invalidated. This is going to come up when I talk about flash loans in a second. Very cool functionality, but you can update the call, and then if the send fails, that update actually gets rolled back. So it's a different way of thinking when you do smart contracts and how you do flows and what things are immutable and what are not. So a couple of things, that's one way. The other thing is a library called reentrancy guard. It basically just locks the function when you enter it and doesn't unlock it until it finishes executing. So if you're to try and come back in, a flag would be met and says, hey, this function is still executing, wait until it's done and come back. So. And with that, I think that's the finish of the original talk. What I'm going to do now is go into a really interesting case from last year called the Kyber swap exploit. This one is really particular to this platform. So unlike some of the other attacks I've researched, things like private key exploits or phishing attacks or allowance scams, this one actually deals with more nuanced exploitation of a smart contract. To give you some high-level overview, I guess I should provide some foundation. So I've brought up DeFi a couple of times and swaps and stuff like that. These are done by what are called decentralized exchanges. They're smart contracts that allow people to swap. And the way that they do this is through what are called liquidity pools. So actually, let me give you an example of how people create scam tokens. I can create a smart contract, mint tokens. It's free. I created the contract myself. I give myself 1 million tokens. These tokens don't have a value because there's no market for them. But I can use an AMM, an automatic market maker, to bootstrap my own market. So I take maybe 1 million of my made up coins, and I take an ETH, 10 ETH, whatever amount. Maybe I use USDC, some other token that has value to other people. Let's use USDC because it's actual dollars. So I take 1 million tokens and I put $1 million into a pool, and I create a liquidity pool. The ratio of those tokens is the price. So it's 1 million to 1 million. Now my tokens are now worth $1. And I can go out and say, hey, people, come buy my tokens. They come and they swap their dollars for my tokens. And so as more dollars go into the pool and more of my made-up tokens get pulled out, the ratio gets skewed and the price goes up, right? And it goes up and it goes up. More people come, swap their dollars for my meme token, and the ratio gets skewed and the value goes up. And this is where rug pools come in. Me as the creator, I pumped it all up. Now, I had to put up $1 million of my own money to start this pool. So I have a little bit on the hook. But if I pump up the value, let's say now there's 500,000 tokens in there, but there's $2 million. I now pull it out, my liquidity, I get to pocket that $2 million. So the tokens, sure, they're worthless, but I put in $1 million and now I'm taking out $2 million. This is how a lot of rug pulls work, right? Because they're able to create their own market. They don't have to go to an exchange and get due diligence and look into, is this token actually worth anything? They just bring their own money and they create their market, right? In this case, they were exploiting one of the existing markets out there. And in this case, they're exploiting a more complicated pool that it's called a concentrated liquidity market maker. I'm not going to go into details, but it basically says, I only want people to trade at a certain price. If the price goes too high or too low, count my liquidity out. And this complication allowed this attacker to take advantage of how calculations were done. It was some rounding error or something. But they put up money and were able to drain the pool. So they had to put up their own money to do this. They added liquidity, they made a couple of swaps, they got the pool into a state it shouldn't have been in, and then they did a swap that gave them a lot more money than they were supposed to. And by doing this, they drained the entire pool of money. So they targeted tons of different pools. I think they made out with like $48 million across, I want to say 6 or so different blockchains. Now, what's fascinating about this attack, and I'm going to go into the details about how we investigate it, is that they use what are called a flash loan. So to actually pull off these attacks, this guy had to put up a bunch of money to create liquidity, to do swaps, in the millions of dollars. Now, he was going to make millions after it was all done, but he had to put up money. Usually, you need to find an investor to do that, but not in blockchain. In blockchain, we have things called flash loans. So there are other DeFi platforms called lending and borrowing protocols. Unlike swaps, you can put up money, people can borrow it for fees. And in the blockchain land, you can actually take what's called a flash loan, an instantaneous loan. The way this works is if you can borrow tokens and then promise that you repay them in the same transaction, then it's basically free. As the lender takes no risk, because as I said, if a transaction can't complete successfully, the whole thing gets rolled back. So you create a smart contract that says something like this. I borrow $1 million, I go to the swap market, I swap for some stuff, and then I return back your $1 million and I keep whatever. You take a small fee, whatever. I can do that in a smart contract in one transaction. And the lender is guaranteed no risk, because if my swap doesn't lead to a profit and I can't pay back the loan, the whole thing gets rolled back and I never gave you the money in the first place. So it's a way that attackers can get access to a lot of money, risk-free, for really cheap. And this is what this attacker did. He borrowed millions of dollars to do these attacks and instantly repaid them. And so let's actually look at what that looks like, right? So I've looked up here the Kyber swap exploiter. In a lot of the cases where I'm investigating, I'm not the first one to the scene. Either the people who are attacked are reporting this, someone else has found it, or we have law enforcement coming to us. So there's a little bit of a thread to pull on a lot of these cases. For example, in this case, Kyber swap exploiter was labeled by Etherscan. So this whole reporting methodology where these things become relevant and people mark these labels. So we have a starting point here, right? I can look at transactions and stuff like this. I can find, for example, where he created, let's see, find where they created a smart contract. Where was that? Smart contract creation, right here. And we can see, if I go to it, these are the transactions that he used to at least exploit some of the pools. And we'll go into that. So let's go into one of these addresses, and we can see some information about it. So we can see tons of different transactions that are talking about back and forth of tokens. We see things like NFTs being minted. This is for liquidity positions, but this is pretty hard to read, right? I can read this because I'm experienced with it, but it tends to be a little tough. So this is where we use some of our own technology. So this is part of one of the products that my company makes, Anchain, called Screen, which is the smart contract risk evaluation engine. So this is what this transaction looks like graphed visually, right? There is a lot going on here.
That's one transaction?
One transaction. And it actually, there's 246 individual internal transactions occurring in this one transaction. It's a lot. It's a lot. But it does help me navigate this a little bit better. I can see kind of represented as dots the different entities, and we can see here. So this is the exploit smart contract. We have Aave. This is an exchange. This is where they were taking out a lot of their flash loans. We can see different pools that are being targeted by these flash loans. We can see different tokens that are being referenced here. Wrapped Ethereum, Frex ETH. Kyber swap. So there's a lot of entities here, but one of the things, for example, I can show you why this visually is important. Right here, you can see these different circles. Each one of these represents another attack on a different pool. 2, 51, 100, and you can see there's about 50 transactions in between these. So this tells me there's about 50 steps for each exploitation, right? We can also see right immediately after, one of the first steps is taking a flash loan. So I can start to walk through this bit by bit. I can kind of highlight 3, and I can go and step through this bit by bit and walk through this. So that's the visual way. The other way I can do this is here. I can actually see the commands that are being executed, the different entities that are being related, and if there are assets being changed, I can see them over here. So we can see in this case, he's taking out a 2,000 ETH loan. And Ethereum right now is, I think, at like almost $4,000 a piece. So that's a lot of money. And this is just one transaction. He did like 80 or something like that just to drain all these pools.
So where did he get the tool to do this?
When you say tool.
All right, you have this to look at. Did this individual or was it a nation state? Because this is just something that when you said 200 transactions and all that other stuff, that's just...
There is almost certainly, they almost certainly had a whole period of research where they were identifying how, because listen, this exploit required a more detailed understanding of the platform he was exploiting than the people who developed it. It was really nitty gritty and some rounding error somewhere, something like that they were able to misconfigure the pool. There's a lot of applications out there for investigating this. I mean, if he was really hardcore, he could have just taken a lot of the code that runs that platform is public. So one of the things he could have done is copy the code, put it in a sandbox, and play with it himself. Or he could be using these tools. Now this tool, not public, but I'm going to show you another tool that can be used for this investigation, gives even more information that I likely did use. This kind of gives us a trace call of the transaction flow. And this is where we can get some really good information. Now, the nice thing about this attacker, he was helpful. He logged a bunch of information. This is not standard. This is something he would have had to go through the trouble of adding a library to a smart contract to log debug messages into the blockchain. We can see starting pool, setting, changes, raping now, not too nice, but initial state. And he is debugging and printing out a lot of information throughout his attack that helps us understand what's going on.
Oh, was that to help him too?
It was to help him. Oh, certainly. And this is so complicated. He almost certainly, and we see further down, he's reporting things. He almost certainly had a whole period of testing, in a sandbox and a test chain or whatever, to have done this. And we did find certain transactions that failed, where something went wrong. Either he doesn't understand or.
How much did he get in the end?
48 million.
Oh, totally worth whatever you spend on. If I could teach you my whole life end to end.
Well, here's the fascinating thing, because we trace a lot of these transactions. Sure, they get 48 million, but in a lot of the cases, they don't know what to do with it.
Oh, I
They launder it, they do it, and I've got a bunch of cases that I'm investigating, some of them year and a half old, where millions of dollars are just sitting in a wallet somewhere and haven't been touched because they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to get it. Like, we see them. Listen, there are laundering platforms and whatever, but the key to this is crypto. Crypto might be the Wild West, but the on-ramps and off-ramps are heavily guarded. So to get your dollars into crypto, or to get your crypto into dollars, that's where they're going to catch you. And honestly, as an investigator, that's always where I'm looking. Trying to do attribution on-chain is almost impossible. There is some. 9 times out of 10, the way that we're looking for in anything is how did they fund this, or where did they take the money? And that's usually because they're taking it to an exchange a lot of the time, and exchanges are KYC'd. Have know your customer. Yeah, have know your customer, and 9 times out of 10 when we catch people, it's that. Tracing onto an exchange that has KYC. Yeah. And actually, let me show you some of the tools we use for that. I want to bring this up. So I've been looking at smart contract tools. This is another tool we call that's called CISO. This is about looking at asset transfers and allowing us to trace. So this is a visual representation of what the same attack looked like. So we have Kyber Exploiter 1. This is the person who kind of set up the attack, right? They're the one who deployed the smart contract. They're the one who are doing execution. But Smart Exploiter 2 is the one that's actually receiving the funds. And we can look at what those funds look like, right? So here's the exploit contract, and here are the different pools that are being used. And each one of these pools has 2 different tokens that are involved in the pool, so we're going to see 2 different assets coming out of every one of these pools. And we can see money goes in, money comes out. Small amount comes in, large amount comes out. Small amount comes in, large amount comes out. And we see this for all of these different pools. We also see, communication with this exchange. These are the flash loans. These are the money that's being borrowed. So we're seeing the exchanges where they're borrowing money. We see the places where they're attacking. And then once they take it all, he sends it all over here. So he's draining all of these pools and bringing it into the exploiter. The other thing we can see here is bridges. Arbitrum bridge, Optimism bridge. These are other blockchains called L2s that were also attacked. They also have this swap platform on them. So this guy started in Ethereum, did his initial funding here, and I can trace it back. I think he got it, Tornado Cash. Tornado Cash is a money laundering platform. Uses what are called zero-knowledge proofs to break the connection. So money coming out, there's no way we can find who actually funded this originally. It's really good. Best thing that happened here is they got sanctioned by OFAC. And while it's still around and still used, it killed the liquidity. So it's used a lot for funding attacks, usually just a little bit of money to get the ball rolling, but there's not enough liquidity there to hide like $50 million. You're going to be too big of a fish in a small pond.
So how do tumblers work in all of this?
So tumblers are much more traditional Bitcoin that don't have smart contracts. Tumblers fallen a little bit out of favor. They're still around. They basically just work on creating a lot of wallets and mixing funds and making it difficult to trace transactions. It's not impossible, just difficult. And actually the reason it's fallen out of favor is a lot of companies like TRM, Chainalysis, have created techniques that is pretty good at unwinding those tumblers and those mixers. So this is why I bring up Tornado Cash. A lot of these money laundering protocols are starting to go to zero knowledge proofs. Whole thing in blockchain, really complicated crypto involved, but it's basically a way that you can prove something without revealing the information. And in this case, you deposit money into a big pool with a lot of other people, and then you get a password or a code that represents. You then take that password, you generate a new fresh wallet that has no history attached to it, and you use that to take your money out. And because you're in a central pool, there's no way to connect the two. I say no way. If you're careless, there are ways, and a lot of these protocols work through denominations like coins, like 5, 10, whatever. We can do unique denomination matching. Really as if you're doing a lot of money. So like 100, 100, 100, 150, 50, 50, and we look, has anyone deposited that combination of denominations before? Now, if it's just $20, well, a lot of people have deposited $20, but if you're depositing over, using 50 denominations, that's uniquely identifying. So there are techniques like that, but it's tough. It's tough. But yeah, so we bring up bridges because this guy kind of funded it here, but then went off to other blockchains, Arbitrum, Optimism, Base. I think he had 8 different blockchains, but he funded them through this bridge.
What about
So-
Monero and stuff like that?
Yeah, Monero is really interesting. Monero is falling out of favor a lot. Still preferred by criminals and stuff like that. Not a blockchain. Not a smart contract blockchain. So it's a lot more like Bitcoin or XRP in that it's just a singular asset, but I don't believe they have smart contracts on them. But the thing with Monero is privacy is built in. From what I see, people are just kind of drawing a wall around Monero. Legitimate exchanges and stuff don't deal with it. It's kind of like Tornado Cash. It's still around, you can't stop it, but you can kind of put a mark of shame on it and tell people not to use it. And that's kind of what's happening with Monero. It's also interesting too, because even though these blockchains and there are bridges kind of only work within specific ecosystems. So Ethereum is what's called EVM. It works on the Ethereum virtual machine. But almost every other blockchain I've mentioned here is also an EVM blockchain. They use the same process. So everything looks the same, they're just a different blockchain. So they use smart contracts, they structure things the same way. The underlying mechanism is the same, they're just running their own one. So Optimism is EVM, Arbitrum is EVM, Binance Smart Chain is EVM, Base L2 is EVM. There's a lot of them that are even, I think Avalanche is EVM or has an EVM chain. But things like XRP, things like Monero are not, which makes bridging much more difficult. The bridging there is much more like traditional exchanges of just some guy who's going to swap your assets for you.
So if someone was to just swap assets into Monero,
I don't know of any way to go from this ecosystem into Monero. Not without a centralized kind of exchange or broker that's doing that transaction.
They have atomics in Monero also, don't they? They have atomics swaps in Monero also, don't they?
Do they? Okay, I didn't realize that. I don't know if you...
It's with Ethereum.
Right.
Bitcoin or sure has it.
Oh, they have it with Bitcoin. That's good to know. Okay. That's definitely something I've been meaning to look more into is the bridging of non-like assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum or XRP and Bitcoin and stuff like that. I'll definitely look into that.
So you would have to go into from ETH to Bitcoin and then to...
Yeah, and there's even like a way, technically there is a bridge for Bitcoin to ETH, it's called Wrap Bitcoin. I don't know enough about how that looks on the Bitcoin side. Because on the Ethereum side, there's a smart contract that deals with it, like a lot of these bridges. But there's no smart contracts on Bitcoin. I think they have some type of validator network. It gets more complicated. They do try and get more decentralized. It's not just some custodian that's doing it. But yeah, when you get into bridging, it's a whole can of worms. And the problem is it's such a new industry. There's no standards. People are experimenting. People are trying stuff out and stuff like that. So yeah, this is one of the tools we can use for diving into and getting some kind of idea of what's going on under the hood. And let me show you. Let's see if I can find a good one. Flash loan, execute operations. Where do we have a swap? Here we go. A swap transaction. So using this debugger, let's see if I can then go to the swap implementation. Here we go. Step into...
One second. Let's just see a message in Discord here.
So here we go. What I can do with this debugger, what do we have here? Me Anderson.
Your graph.
I can use this to step by step go through the source code of the smart contract and actually look at the what is being executed and the actual parameters that are going in and out. So a tool like this is what I use for digging into an exploit like the one we saw in KyberSwap, where there's really like fine manipulation of values and trying to figure out what's going on, what's being misconfigured. We can walk through with a debugger like this, look at the source code, and see the actual changes that are occurring bit by bit. So really interesting tools. There's some really interesting stuff out there. And yeah, the last thing I'll show you guys too is This tool allows us to branch out really easily. Let me see if I can do this with like this contract. So if I double click here, nothing there. Okay. Let me see if I can find one. There we go. So by double clicking, I can really quickly jump from node to node. And we can restrict by dates, values, assets, and this is just one of the primary tools that we use for investigating these crimes, especially like you said with mixers. One of the things we could do here is find all of the people going into it, see through and out, and kind of track those funds through as well.
Thank you.
So I think with that, I will open up the floor to any questions you guys have. Yeah, please.
Without having your background, I haven't touched Bitcoin, any of it. How does one, without your background, get into this without getting burned? Like, I'll definitely have a hardware wallet.
When you say into it, in the investigation side or the actual using this technology?
Using.
Yeah, be careful.
See, that's the be careful. Yeah.
I know. What I would say is even someone like me, I have a very low risk tolerance. So even me who does this stuff day in and day out, I see people going out there and trying to like put money into a project that they've never heard of or don't do due diligence. Don't do that. Like my point in all of this is do your research. Don't invest your money in anything you don't feel comfortable. You'll see a lot of people throwing money at stuff. You'll see a lot of people making tons of money. The key to Web3 is like block out the noise, look at stuff, and only do stuff if it makes sense to you.
Like Peter Lynch said, you know, if you're standing next to an investment manager, does it make sense? Does he look the part? Does he feel the part? Does he talk the part? You know, a duck is a duck.
Does he have a website?
And so when, like the Ethereum stuff, like there's all these tokens you can get invested in, whatever. If you really want to get into crypto, put your money in Bitcoin and Ethereum. Everything else is like an order of magnitude more volatile, more risky, whatever. Those have been around for a while. I'm fairly certain they're going to be whatever. If you want to start getting into meme coins, man, you're like really down there. For me, even the stuff that I've played around with, like doing some swaps or playing around with lending and borrowing protocols, I'm very cautious. And more importantly, a lot of this stuff is expensive, especially on Ethereum. I put like $2,000 into a lending protocol, and then fees got so high that it was going to cost me $2,000 to take my $2,000 out. So it's nothing. My money was locked up for 3 years until fees fell to a point where I could take the money out and not lose money. So it's weird. It's a weird industry. If you really want to play around with it, if you're interested from a development perspective, there are test nets out there. You can get free money. There are faucets. You just go to a place and you get free ETH because it's not really worth anything. You go around, you can play with it. Get a wallet. There's no risk to it. Right? It's a playground. You know, you can get some tokens and go on a swap platform and do some swaps, and it's like paper trading, basically. Now the test nets are there for testing, right? That's where developers go so that they can deploy stuff and actually see how they would work in an environment, because in their sandbox only their smart contracts exist, but in this testnet you can have access to like a testnet DeFi platform. So if your smart contracts deals with those, you can see what it would look like in the real world without actually putting up some real money to do it. Other interesting thing too is stay away from Ethereum. Ethereum's great, but it's expensive. That's why all these L2s and these other EVM compatible chains are great. Base, ZK Sync, Optimism. The fees on there is a fraction. You can do a swap for like a couple of cents. Where on Ethereum it's going to cost you $10 or something like that, depending on fees. So do that. If you do want to play around, I would say create a separation from your everyday wallet and your actual assets. I investigated a case, really unfortunate, where, you know, I'm not going to say who it was, but they accidentally fell for an airdrop scam, one of those airdrops I was telling you about, and it drained all their money. Now, unfortunately, the wallet that they were using had $20 million in it. Yeah. And so the first, like, we went and investigated, and the first thing we told these guys is, hey, going forward, segregate your stuff. The stuff that you're doing every day shouldn't have, you know, the $20 million access to it. Create a little separation. I myself have a couple of wallets on my phone, but my real funds are sitting in a hardware wallet at home. And even that, so I told you about those 12 phrases. I have a steel plate that I've hammered those 12 phrases into, put in like encased in plastic, and put it in a safety deposit box.
So if you're not willing to take that level of security, then think about it very.
When you mean a hardware wallet, again, you know, one doesn't know. Like I trust Logitech. I but Logitech's not gonna make a hardware, so, you know, at the end of the day, the supply chain and all the other things.
There's two
How would
big
you know?
companies. Yeah, there's two big companies that are known in the space for hardware wallets. The one I use is called Ledger.
Mhm.
I like them. The other one is called, I think it's called Trezor.
Is that Zen layer?
Trezor. What?
Zen layer?
Treasure.
Treznor. I think it's a
Got hacked,
Okay.
last year. I wouldn't go.
Trezor. Got hacked last.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard of them in a while. But
That,
these
that
guys,
was the one that was the.
These guys got hacked. Okay.
No, it's not, they didn't get hacked. Bill Kingpin did was able to reverse one a while back
okay.
ago on his channel, I think.
Got it. This is the one I have. This guy. I like it. Now again, as I say, it's the actual private key that matters, the 12 phrases. I still have that. So if this thing were, for example, to get broken or stolen or whatever, it's the phrases. I could just buy another one and put those phrases on there. So that steel plate that has those phrases on there, that is what I need to keep safe. This thing has a PIN code on it. I could even lose it. If you don't know my PIN code, you can't use it to sign my transactions.
Yeah, so I think he did. Joe Graham did a YouTube video
Okay.
on him.
Was he the one? Yes. No. He's the one who hardware hacked it.
Yeah, he
And-
hardware hacked it.
And it was so disappointing because the guy had no money on it.
That was a long time ago,
Yes.
but last year their website got hacked and they were storing recovery phrases for certain people on their site open, and that got hacked, and like other stuff too happened that like shouldn't have happened.
You just reminded me too, Ledger got hacked. Not the hardware wallet themselves, but the library. One of the libraries that they produced to
Yeah.
connect their wallet.